Almost every animal can swim the very first time it touches deep water. Drop a dog, a horse, a cat, even a newborn elephant into a river and it paddles, lifts its nose, and goes. No lessons, no practice. The body simply knows what to do. Now drop in a human who was never taught, and something completely different happens. They thrash, they panic, they push themselves under, and they sink. We are one of the only large animals on Earth that has to be taught how to swim. And yet, somehow, thousands of years before swimming pools and lifeguards and lessons, ancient humans learned to do it anyway. Some of them got so good that they could dive deeper and hold their breath longer than should be possible. So how? How did a creature that is not born knowing how to swim ever figure it out? Start with the strange part, because it explains everything else. Most mammals swim by instinct, using the same four-legged motion they already use to walk. It is basically an automatic dog paddle. Their spine stays roughly level, their nose points forward, and the paddling keeps them afloat without a single thought. When our ancestors stood up and began walking on two legs, we quietly broke that gift. We rebuilt the human body for land. The spine went vertical, the head grew heavy and high, and our deepest instinct in water became exactly the wrong one. When a human is frightened in deep water, the urge is to lift the head and chest up to breathe, and lifting up shoves the rest of you straight down. The very reflex that keeps a dog's nose above the surface is the one that drowns a human. So swimming, for us, is not something the body does on its own. It is something the body has to be retaught, slowly, against its own panic. But wait, you might be thinking, do not babies swim? Drop an infant into water and it seems to hold its breath and paddle. That is real, and it even has a name, the diving reflex. For the first months of life, a human baby will close off its throat underwater, slow its own heartbeat, and make little swimming motions. For a long time, people pointed to this as proof that we are born swimmers. We are not. That reflex fades within the first half year of life, and it was never true swimming to begin with, just an automatic response, like a flinch or a blink. By the time you are old enough to actually save yourself in deep water, the instinct is long gone. Which means something simple and a little staggering. Every single human alive who can swim today learned it. And every human in all of history who could swim was either taught by someone or taught themselves on purpose. So how did ancient people manage that, with no instructor, no shallow end, and no idea what they were doing? The same way humans learn almost everything that is not built in. By necessity, by watching, and by handing it down. Picture where early humans actually lived. Not in the dry middle of continents, but along rivers, lakes, marshes, and coastlines, because that is where the fresh water, the fish, the birds, and the safety were. A child growing up on the edge of a river is in and around water every single day of its life. It watches the older children and the adults move through it without fear. It wades in, slips, goes under, comes up coughing, and slowly makes the single most important discovery in all of swimming. If you stop fighting the water and let your body go flat and loose, the water holds you up. Swimming was not invented once by a lone genius. It was rediscovered over and over by millions of children who grew up wet, copying the people around them. Where water was woven into daily life, swimming spread and stuck. Where it was not, it simply never appeared. And we can actually see how far back this reaches. Deep in the Sahara, in a stretch of desert so lifeless today that almost nothing survives there, there is a cave wall covered in little painted human figures, arms stretched out, legs trailing behind them, unmistakably swimming. It is called the Cave of Swimmers, and it is roughly 10,000 years old, from a time when the Sahara was not sand, but green grassland dotted with lakes and rivers. People were swimming, and proud enough of it to paint it on a wall before the very first cities existed. The ancient Egyptians swam in the Nile, taught their children to do it, and even had a written symbol for it, a hieroglyph of a person doing the front crawl. To the ancient Greeks, swimming was so basic to a functioning adult that they had a stock insult for a hopeless, useless man. They said he could neither read nor swim. For people who lived beside water, swimming was not a sport or a hobby. It was just part of being a capable human being. But here is the twist that surprises nearly everyone. For most of human history, across most of the world, the majority of people could not swim at all. Not farmers, not city dwellers, and most shocking of all, very often not even sailors. For centuries, the men who spent their entire lives at sea, who crossed whole oceans, frequently could not swim a single stroke. Many of them believed that if the sea decided to take you, then knowing how to swim only stretched out the suffering, so there was no point in learning. Drowning was one of the most common ways to die in the ancient and medieval world. A quiet, constant killer at every flooded river, every ferry crossing, every shipwreck within sight of shore. And in much of medieval Europe, the skill almost vanished completely. Water came to be associated with filth, with disease, with drowning, even with the testing of accused witches, and the swimming that the Greeks and Romans had so prized faded into something rare and faintly suspicious. So the story of swimming was never a straight climb upward. It was a fragile, learned skill that some cultures lovingly kept alive, while others let it quietly die out. And while large parts of Europe were forgetting how to swim, other peoples were pushing it towards something that looks almost superhuman. Across the islands of the Pacific, children swam before they could properly walk, and grew into adults who could cross stretches of open ocean that would kill a strong European swimmer. Off the coasts of Southeast Asia, a people called the Bajau, the sea nomads, have lived so much of their lives in the water, diving for fish and pearls, that their bodies themselves have changed. Generations of constant freediving gave them, on average, noticeably larger spleens, an organ that releases extra oxygen-rich blood when you hold your breath, letting them stay underwater for minutes at a time on a single lungful of air. Off Japan and Korea, whole communities of women divers work the seafloor by hand, with no tanks, well into old age. None of these people were freaks of nature. They were ordinary humans, born no better at swimming than you are, raised inside a culture that taught the skill from infancy and then drove it to its absolute limit. The gap between a person who drowns in waist-deep water and one who dives like a seal was almost never biology. It was upbringing. There is one last surprise, hidden in how they actually swam. The smooth, fast front crawl that you probably picture when you imagine swimming, the over-arm stroke with the face in the water, was for a long time completely unknown in Europe. Europeans swam a slow, stiff, heads-up breaststroke, partly just to keep their faces out of the cold and dirty water. Then, in the 1800s, Europeans who watched swimmers from the Americas and the Pacific were astonished. Here were people tearing across the water, face down, arms windmilling over the top, moving far faster than anything the Europeans had ever managed. They had to be shown the fastest way to swim by the very peoples they so often looked down on. Even the technique itself, the part that feels obvious once you see it, had to be invented, lost in some places, and then learned all over again from the cultures that had never forgotten it. And that is the real answer to how ancient humans learned to swim. They did it the same way they learned to control fire, to speak, to count, to give birth safely, and to build. Not through instinct, because the instinct was simply not there. They did it by being thrown into the water of real life, by watching the people who came before them, by failing, swallowing water, and trying again, and then by carefully handing the skill down to their own children, body to body, year after year. Almost everything that feels natural about being a human is secretly like this. It feels built-in, automatic, obvious. But it was actually discovered, taught, lost, and rescued from being forgotten over and over again by people who took the time and the care to pass it on. So the next time you push off from the side and glide through the water without even thinking about it, remember that you are doing something no human is born able to do. Somewhere far back, your ancestors stood at the edge of a cold river, slipped under, came up gasping and spitting, and made two small decisions that changed everything. They chose to try again. and then they chose to teach the next person how. You are not a natural swimmer. There is no such thing as a natural swimmer. You are the end of a very long chain of people who refused to drown, and who made sure that the ones who came after them would not have to either.